Billionaire forces his plain Jane cleaner to join him on a trip, but falls in love when he realizes she entered his life as part of the scenery, invisible, silent, disposable. But there was something in the way she challenged him without words that unsettled him more than any enemy. He was control, arrogance, loneliness disguised as power. She was the only one who asked for nothing, yet took everything. And as he tried to keep her at a distance, she became the mistake he longed to repeat. A cleaning lady, a billionaire, and a feeling that grew where there were only orders and silence. Sorry to interrupt your story, but if you like this type of content, don't forget to subscribe. Bless this channel by helping us grow, and may God multiply it back to you twofold. Thank you and enjoy the video. The clock read 4:30 a.m. when Valentina Sanchez crossed the deserted lobby of the most imposing skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. With silent steps, as if afraid to wake the ghosts of the night, she pushed her cleaning cart across the gleaming floors she herself had polished the day before. At 28, Valentina was not what she seemed. Beneath the shapeless grey uniform that erased her curves and the black hair pulled back in a severe bun, hid a woman who had fought against all odds to earn her degree in international business. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez," she'd greet the security guard in a soft voice, who would barely look up from his phone. As always, she received no reply. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, Valentina mentally reviewed her routine. First the boardroom, then the cubicles, the cafeteria, and finally the most important office, that of Mr. Ethan Vidal, CEO and owner of the real estate empire Vidal Enterprises. New York City was still sleeping under a blanket of faint lights and morning fog when Valentina began to clean the private sanctuary of the most powerful and feared man in the building. At 40, Vidal was known for his obsessive meticulousness and his calculating coldness, a man who had turned ambition into an art form and indifference into his personal brand. "Blinds at a perfect 45-degree angle," Valentina muttered as she precisely adjusted the shades. "Temperature at 73 degrees, not one more, not one less." She knew that if anything was out of place, even by a millimeter, she would hear the disdain in Vidal's voice. It wouldn't be the first time. With precise movements, Valentina cleaned every surface of the mahogany and glass office. The desk had to be impeccable, the Mont Blanc pens perfectly aligned, the folders organized by color and size, the bottle of Voss water placed on the right side with a clean glass beside it. "Sometimes I think I'm more of an architect than a janitor," she thought with a touch of irony as she arranged the business magazines at a perfect angle. Everything Valentina did went unnoticed, but her absence would be immediately felt. It was the paradox of her invisibility, indispensable yet ignored, crucial yet despised. For 5 years, she had endured lewd stares from some executives, condescending comments from secretaries who saw her as an inexplicable threat, and the complete indifference of Vidal, who barely registered her existence beyond an occasional nod. "Good morning, Mr. Vidal," she had tried to say during her first few months. The response was always the same: silence, or at best, a grunt that didn't quite form a word. As she cleaned the enormous window overlooking the awakening of the American capital, Valentina remembered her mother's words. "Dignity, mija, is the one thing no one can take from you unless you let them." Socorro, with the wisdom of a woman who had cleaned other people's houses her entire life, had taught her to hold her head high, even when scrubbing the floor. "Get an education so you don't have to bow your head, but if you have to clean floors, do it with the pride of someone who knows there's no shame in honest work." At 6:45 a.m., Valentina put the finishing touches on the main office. By then, she had already cleaned 3 meeting rooms, 2 common areas, and organized the executive cafeteria. The building was beginning to show the first signs of life. Guards changing shifts, reception staff arriving with their morning coffees, an early rising executive with deep circles under his eyes. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, like a Swiss watch, the private elevator would announce the arrival of Ethan Vidal. Valentina knew she had to disappear before that moment. Not because of a written rule, but because years ago she had made the mistake of being present when the CEO arrived. The look of disgust on his face, as if she were a stain on his impeccable stage, had been message enough. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Valentina saw her distorted reflection on the polished surface of the desk. She sometimes wondered if she was becoming as transparent as others saw her, if her soul was taking on the ghostly quality everyone seemed to attribute to her. "Degree in international business," she reminded herself with bitterness. 3. 9 GPA thesis with honors, fluent in 3 languages, all for this to be the shadow that vanishes before the corporate dawn. The sound of the private elevator activating alerted her. It was early, too early even for Vidal. Valentina hurried her movements. She had to get out before... The elevator doors opened, revealing the imposing figure of Ethan Vidal, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his brow furrowed as he spoke heatedly into his phone. "I don't give a damn what she says, Ramirez. If she cancels at this stage, she's in breach of contract." His voice echoed in the empty office as he strode forward, not noticing Valentina's presence. "I need someone presentable for the trip to Greece. I can't show up at that gala alone. Do you understand what's at stake?" Valentina tried to make herself even smaller, silently gathering her cleaning products, praying to become completely invisible for once. That's when Vidal saw her. His eyes, a cold and calculating brown, landed on her like someone spotting a fly in their soup. For a moment, irritation crossed his face, but then something unexpected happened. His features relaxed into what looked like a sudden idea. "I'll call you back, Ramirez," he said, ending the call without a goodbye. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with a tension Valentina couldn't decipher. For the first time in 5 years, Ethan Vidal was looking at her, truly looking. And that gaze, far from acknowledging her humanity, seemed to be assessing her usefulness, like someone considering an unexpected tool. "You," he said finally, pointing his index finger as if identifying an object. "What's your name?" Valentina felt her heart stop. In 5 years, it was the first time he had asked for her name. "Valentina Sanchez, Mr. Vidal," she answered, her voice firmer than she expected. A calculating smile slowly formed on Vidal's face, an expression that did not bode well for the invisible woman who, for the first time, had been noticed. Thursday dawned with a fine drizzle over New York City. Valentina arrived at the corporate building with her uniform slightly damp and her hair tucked under a waterproof cap. It was one of those days when the city turned grey, as if the sky were reflecting the mood of its inhabitants. She had barely begun her routine when she noticed something unusual. Vidal's office was already lit at 5 in the morning. Never, in 5 years, had that happened. Cautiously, Valentina approached and heard the businessman's agitated voice through the slightly ajar door. "Damn it, Paulina, you can't do this to me now." Vidal's voice boomed with fury. "What do you mean your agency got you a better contract? We had a deal." Valentina froze, her hand hovering inches from the doorknob. She shouldn't be listening, but she couldn't interrupt either. "These are the most important investors in Europe. Do you know what this means for the Grenadines resort project?" "No. Don't give me excuses." A tense pause. "The photo shoot in Milan pays better? Are you serious?" Another pause. "Fine, go to hell. I'll find someone else." The crash of the phone being slammed against the desk made Valentina jump back. She quickly pretended to wipe down a nearby glass door as Vidal stormed out of his office. He didn't see her. He walked directly to the small break room and poured himself a whiskey, despite it being barely 5:30 in the morning. "Damn Paulina," he muttered as he drank. "Now where am I supposed to find a presentable date for tomorrow?" Vidal returned to his office, and Valentina waited several minutes before daring to enter to perform her usual cleaning. With movements as quiet as a frightened mouse, she began to pick up the pieces of the shattered phone. "The model cancelled on me," Vidal said, suddenly startling her. He was sitting in his executive chair, contemplating the city through the large window. She hadn't realized he was still there. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Vidal," Valentina replied, looking down. Vidal turned slowly. His eyes scanned Valentina from head to toe, as if seeing her for the first time. It wasn't a lewd look, but an evaluative, calculating one, like someone examining merchandise of dubious quality. "Do you have a passport?" he asked abruptly. The question landed like a lightning bolt on a clear day. Valentina blinked, confused. "Yes, Mr. Vidal." "Is it valid?" "Yes, sir. I renewed it 6 months ago to visit my aunt in Los Angeles, though in the end I couldn't." "I'm leaving for Athens tomorrow," Vidal interrupted, taking the last sip of his whiskey. "There's a gala dinner with the main European investors for the resort project. I can't show up alone." Valentina nodded, still not understanding why he was telling her this, the invisible woman, the one who cleaned his mess every morning without him deigning to look at her. "You're coming with me," he stated flatly, as if commenting on the weather. The bottle of cleaner slipped from Valentina's hands, spilling partially onto the floor she had just polished. The scent of lemon filled the office. Excuse me, she managed to articulate as she hurried to clean up the mess. Don't get excited. Vidal stood up, smoothing the invisible wrinkles on his $10,000 suit. I don't need you to socialize or entertain anyone. I just need a female presence by my side for the formalities. Valentina straightened up, clutching the damp cloth. A mixture of confusion and indignation began to bubble in her chest. I don't understand, sir. Vidal smirked. It's quite simple. In these circles, a man alone is seen as incomplete or untrustworthy. I need a date and well, you're the option I have on hand. But I'm the person who cleans your offices, Valentina protested weakly. Not a date. Exactly. Vidal's smile widened with a malicious glint. Don't you see? It's perfect. Your obvious simplicity, for lack of a better word, will highlight my status. It's like wearing an accessory that underscores your own value by contrast. Every word was a slap in the face. Valentina felt the heat rise up her neck to her cheeks. Besides, Vidal continued, circling her like a predator, it'll be amusing to see the faces of those stuffy Europeans when I arrive with my cleaning staff as my date. A little private joke. Valentina squeezed the cloth in her hands until her knuckles turned white. I'm sorry, Mr. Vidal, but I don't think... I'm not asking you. Vidal cut her off coldly. I'm informing you. We leave tomorrow at 9. The trip is for 1 week. You'll be paid triple your normal salary plus expenses. But my mother is ill. I can't leave her alone for a week. Valentina objected, feeling the ground give way beneath her. Hire someone to look after her. With what I'm paying you, you can cover that and her medication for 3 months. Valentina froze. How did he know about her mother's medication? She had never shared personal details with anyone at the company. Vidal interpreted her silence as a negotiation. Fine. 4 months of medication, he conceded impatiently, and an additional bonus if you behave appropriately. I'm not for sale, Mr. Vidal. Valentina's voice came out firmer than she expected. The businessman let out a cold laugh. Of course not. For that, you'd need to be worth something first. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Valentina looked into her boss's dark eyes, searching for any trace of humanity. She found none. It's a direct order from your superior, Vidal finally declared. Either you come with me tomorrow, or you can find another job cleaning toilets. Your choice. Images flooded Valentina's mind. Her mother connected to the oxygen tank they rented monthly, the medical bills piling up on the kitchen table, the endless calls from collection agencies. She had held this job for 5 years, the only one that allowed her to take night classes and care for her mother in the afternoons. I'll be ready tomorrow at 9, sir, she replied in a hollow voice. Excellent decision. Vidal consulted his Rolex as if the conversation had already taken too long. My assistant will send you the details. Try to wear something presentable, if you own anything of the sort. When Vidal left the office, Valentina remained motionless, feeling her dignity shatter into 1,000 pieces. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Dignity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you let them. But as she cleaned up the spilled cleaning products, Valentina wondered if she had just let him. The sun was beginning to set when Valentina arrived at her home in the Bronx. It was a small apartment in a building worn down by time and neglect, but maintained with the care that only pride and dignity can provide. The walls were freshly painted a warm yellow, and the pots of geraniums on the tiny fire escape contrasted with the harshness of the surroundings. I'm home, Mama, Valentina announced, trying to keep her voice steady as she closed the door behind her. Socorro Sanchez was waiting in her wheelchair by the window, where she knitted while watching the bustling life of the neighborhood below. At 65, diabetes had taken first a foot and then her mobility, but not her spirit. What is it, Mija? You felt off since you walked in, the woman said without looking up from her knitting. After a lifetime of raising her daughter alone, she could read her emotions like clear water. Valentina dropped her bag and keys on the kitchen table. She tried to respond, but a lump in her throat stopped her. The tears she had held back all day began to flow uncontrollably. He humiliated me, Mama, she managed to say between sobs, as if I were worthless. Socorro put down her knitting and wheeled herself toward her daughter, who had collapsed onto the small living room sofa. Tell me everything, she said calmly, taking Valentina's hands in hers. Between tears and outrage, Valentina recounted Vidal's proposal, every condescending word, every look of superiority. And the worst part is, I accepted, she finished bitterly. For the money, For your medicine. For this roof over our heads. What am I becoming, Mama? She expected to see indignation in her mother's eyes, perhaps even disappointment. Instead, she found a serene, almost calculating gaze. You know what I see, Valentina? An opportunity, the old woman replied. An opportunity? Valentina blinked, confused. For what? To be humiliated internationally? Socorro shook her head and began to wheel herself toward the bedroom. Come with me, she instructed. In the small room they shared, Socorro leaned over with difficulty and pulled out a carved wooden box from under the bed. It was an old object, with intricate designs that hinted at its origins. This box belonged to your grandmother Eleni, she explained, opening it with reverent care. The same one who started by cleaning houses on the Upper West Side and ended up owning the best haberdashery in the garment district. From inside, she took out a delicate silver locket, with filigree forming the outline of a cycladic bird. Opening it revealed an empty compartment and an inscription on the inside, for when you need to remember who you really are. Your grandmother wore this every day hidden under her work clothes, Socorro continued. It was her way of reminding herself that what she did for a living didn't define who she was. She placed the locket in Valentina's hands, who received it as if it were a fragile treasure. That man thinks he's using you, she said firmly, but maybe life is using him to give you what you deserve. Valentina stared at the jewelry, feeling the weight of 3 generations in her hands. Something in her expression shifted, a spark of determination beginning to burn. I need help, she murmured, pulling out her phone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. Marisol? It's me, Valentina. I need a favor, a huge favor. An hour later, the apartment buzzer rang. When she opened the door, Valentina found herself face to face with a 24-year-old woman with intensely purple hair, multiple ear piercings, and an attitude that challenged the entire world. Cousin, are you telling me you're going to Greece with that asshole? Marisol exclaimed as she barged in, dragging 2 enormous suitcases. What a fucking insult, but holy shit, what an opportunity. Socorro smiled at her niece's energy, so different from Valentina's serenity. Watch your mouth, Marisol, she chided without any real severity. Sorry, Tia, the young woman responded automatically. It's the excitement. Marisol Hernandez was a final-year fashion design student at FITE on a scholarship for her extraordinary talent. To pay her expenses, she worked as a stylist for indie productions and photo shoots. I don't want to become someone else, Valentina clarified as Marisol opened her suitcases, revealing an arsenal of makeup, hair tools, and a few carefully folded garments. I just want them to see who I really am. Prima, Marisol took her by the shoulders, looking at her intently. We're not creating a character. We're taking off the mask of invisibility those assholes forced you to wear. The small apartment transformed into a makeshift studio. Marisol laid out her tools with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. First, let's see what you've got in your closet, she said, heading to Valentina's small wardrobe. The disappointment on her face was evident as she found only grey uniforms, some worn-out jeans and simple blouses. This is like Cinderella's before picture, she muttered. Good thing I came prepared. From the second suitcase, she pulled out several garments wrapped in protective plastic. These are my designs for my final project, inspired by the modern Latina woman breaking barriers, she explained with pride. I'm lending them to you. No, they're a gift. No one will wear them better than you. Marisol displayed elegant yet understated dresses, sophisticated outfits in tones that perfectly complemented Valentina's olive skin, and accessories that added a touch of distinction without being ostentatious. These are perfect for international meetings, she explained, as Valentina incredulously touched the soft fabric of a navy blue dress. Elegant but not pretentious, distinguished but not flashy. For the next few hours, Marisol became a teacher of protocol, etiquette, and posture. With a patience few knew she possessed, she taught Valentina how to sit, how to hold cutlery at a formal dinner, how to slightly incline her head when greeting someone. The difference between a queen and a commoner isn't in her blood, but in how she stands before the world, Marisol said, as she corrected her cousin's posture. Meanwhile, Socorro watched from her chair, smiling as she saw her daughter transform, not into someone else, but into the version of herself that had always been there, hidden under layers of imposed invisibility. Late into the night, Marisol put the finishing touches on Valentina's hair, freeing it from the severe bun to let her natural waves frame her face. "Look at yourself," she said, turning Valentina toward the full-length mirror they had set up in the living room. The woman staring back at her was not a stranger. It was herself, Valentina Sanchez, but as she had never allowed herself to be, poised, elegant, with a dignity that needed no permission to exist. "Remember," Marisol whispered as she fastened the silver locket around her cousin's neck, "you're not going to Greece as Ethan Vidal's servant. You are going as Valentina Sanchez, granddaughter of Eleni, daughter of Socorro, with a degree in international business." The purple-haired young woman smiled fiercely. "And when that asshole realizes what he's had right under his nose all these years, it'll be too late." The roar of the Gulfstream G650's engines subsided as the Vidal Enterprises private jet descended toward the runway at Santorini Airport. Through the small window, Valentina watched the sunset paint the Aegean Sea in shades of orange and gold, a spectacle that seemed torn from a dream. During the 4-hour flight from their layover in London, Ethan Vidal had barely spoken to her. Seated in the rear of the cabin, Valentina had remained silent, wearing a simple navy blue outfit that Marisol had specifically chosen for the trip, discreet but elegant, like a shadow with dignity. "We land in 10 minutes, Vidal had said curtly 2 hours prior, without looking up from his laptop. It was their only interaction. Meanwhile, Valentina had used every minute of the flight. With the tablet Marisol had lent her, she meticulously studied the profiles of every entrepreneur attending the gala dinner that night. She memorized names, companies, interests, and connections. If she was going to be part of this charade, she would at least be prepared. "Looks like you're studying for a test," the flight attendant commented kindly as she served her a cup of tea. "Something like that," Valentina replied with a shy smile. The landing was smooth, as if the aircraft had barely kissed the tarmac. Descending the plane's steps, Valentina felt the Greek air caress her face with a mix of sea salt and Mediterranean scents. For a moment, she forgot who she was and why she was there. "Move it," Vidal's sharp voice brought her back to reality. "The car is waiting." The drive from the airport to Oia, Santorini's most photographed village, passed in tense silence. Valentina gazed out the window, mesmerized by the postcard landscapes unfolding before her eyes. Steep cliffs, gleaming whitewashed houses, and blue domes that seemed to merge with the sky. "You look like a kid in a candy store," Vidal remarked with disdain, not looking up from his phone. "I suppose you've never been outside the Bronx." Valentina pressed her lips together slightly but held her tongue. She discreetly touched the locket under her blouse and replied in a serene voice, "My grandmother was from Crete, Mr. Vidal. I've always dreamed of seeing this land." Vidal looked up for a second, as if he'd just discovered his luggage could talk. Then he returned to his messages without a word. The limousine stopped in front of a stunning villa built into the cliffside. With immaculate white walls and terraced patios descending toward the sea, the property seemed to emerge from the rock itself. "Villa Caldera," the driver announced, "the jewel of Oia." A Greek butler in an impeccable dark suit welcomed them with a bow. As the staff handled the luggage, Vidal and Valentina were led through spaces of minimalist elegance where every window framed a view more spectacular than the last. "Kyrie Vidal, it is an honor to have you with us," the butler said in English with a distinct accent, "and your companion as well." Valentina noticed the man's gaze linger on her briefly, a mix of curiosity and discreet appraisal. What did he see? The cleaning lady in disguise, or someone who might belong in this world of privilege? "I will show you to your suites," the butler continued, guiding them down a marble-floored hallway. The villa had 2 main wings, separated by a central courtyard with an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the Aegean Sea. Vidal was led to the east wing, while Valentina was taken to the west. "Here you are, Kyria," the butler said, opening the door to a suite that took Valentina's breath away. The room, decorated in shades of white and blue, opened onto a private terrace with panoramic views of the sea and the volcano. A king-sized bed with a white gauze canopy dominated the space, complemented by light wood furniture and local stone details. "It's beautiful," Valentina murmured, suddenly feeling out of place in so much beauty. After the butler left, Valentina stood motionless in the middle of the room, afraid any movement might break the spell. Finally, she walked to the window and gazed at the landscape, the intense blue of the sea contrasting with the pure white of the houses cascading down the cliff. A sharp knock on the door startled her. It was Vidal, "We have a gala dinner at 8, he said without preamble. "It's 4 o'clock. You have 4 hours to rest and get ready." His eyes scanned her from head to toe with skepticism. "Try not to embarrass me tonight." Without waiting for a reply, he closed the door, leaving Valentina alone with the echo of his words. For a moment, she felt insecurities threatening to drown her. Who was she to be in a place like this? How could she possibly blend in with Europe's business elite without giving herself away? Then her eyes fell on her suitcase, carefully packed by Marisol. With trembling fingers, she opened it and took out the dress her cousin had chosen for the first night. A navy blue gown, classic in its cut but with contemporary details. The exact shade of the Aegean at dusk, with subtle embroidery that evoked ancient Greek motifs. "This is for you," Marisol had said. "I designed it thinking of a woman who walks between two worlds without losing herself in either." Next to the dress was an envelope. Valentina opened it and found a note in her cousin's energetic script. "Don't forget who you are. You are no one's shadow. Tonight, you shine with your own light." Valentina brought a hand to the silver locket resting on her chest. She opened it and looked at the empty space where her grandmother used to keep a small lock of her daughter's hair. Now that space held a small folded paper on which Valentina had written her own words. "I am Valentina Sanchez, B.A. in International Business, granddaughter of Eleni, daughter of Socorro, and I am not invisible." With renewed determination, she headed to the luxurious marble bathroom to begin her preparation. As the hot water cascaded over her, she felt it wash away not just the fatigue of the journey, but also years of forced invisibility. 2 hours later, standing before the full-length mirror, Valentina barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The navy blue dress hugged her figure with natural elegance. Her black hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and subtle makeup enhanced her features without transforming them. "This isn't a costume," she whispered to herself, remembering Marisol's words. "This is who I've always been." From her suite's terrace, Valentina watched the sun sink slowly below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and pink. She took a deep breath, savoring the air filled with salt and promise. Tonight would be the beginning of something new. She could feel it. She could feel it in the breeze that gently stirred her dress, in the quickened beat of her heart, in the strange calm that precedes great storms. The clock struck 7:30. It was time to go down to the lobby and meet Vidal. It was time for the world to meet the real Valentina Sanchez. The Stavros Palace stood majestically on the shores of the Aegean Sea, an imposing 19th-century neoclassical mansion that had once belonged to one of Greece's most powerful shipping families. Tonight, its marble walls and Ionian columns glowed under strategic lighting designed to rival the Santorini night sky. Ethan Vidal waited in the villa's lobby, checking his Patek Philippe for the 5th time. Flawless in his custom Italian tuxedo, he projected the image of the successful international businessman he had meticulously cultivated. However, impatience tightened his features as he glanced at the time again. 7:55 p.m. "Where the hell is she?" he muttered under his breath. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn toward the staircase. What he saw took his breath away. Descending with measured grace was a woman Ethan didn't immediately recognize. The navy blue dress clung to an elegant figure that the cleaning uniform had always hidden. Her black hair, now free, fell in soft waves, framing a face that seemed transformed. Without the usual fatigue and submissive expression, Valentina's features revealed a harmonious beauty, with Mediterranean hints that suggested her distant Greek ancestry. Ethan stood frozen, unable to reconcile this vision with the invisible woman who cleaned his office every morning. "I'm ready, Mr. Vidal," Valentina announced in a serene voice, completely different from the subservient tone she had always used with him. Ethan's hand instinctively went up to loosen his tie, though it was perfectly knotted. You look presentable," he managed to articulate, struggling to maintain his usual dismissive tone. A slight smile touched Valentina's lips as she held his gaze without flinching. "Thank you," she replied simply, with neither exaggerated humility nor defiant pride, just an acknowledgement of fact. The limousine was waiting for them outside the villa. During the drive to the Stavros Palace, a silence as thick as fog filled the car. Ethan discreetly watched Valentina, who gazed out the window with a calm expression, as if this sort of evening were part of her regular routine. "Stavros Alexandridis is one of the biggest Greek ship owners," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence. His support is crucial for our project in the Grenadines. I know, Valentina replied without looking away from the window. He's also a major collector of Cycladic art and has influence with the Greek Ministry of Tourism. Ethan stared at her, surprised. How do you know that? I did some research on the flight, she answered matter-of-factly. I thought it might be helpful. Before Ethan could respond, the limousine pulled up to the entrance of the Stavros Palace. A liveried footman opened their door. Ethan got out first, and after a moment's hesitation, extended his hand to help Valentina. It was a mechanical gesture, a reflex from years of social etiquette, but he was surprised to feel how small and warm her hand was in his. The palace's foyer was a display of Mediterranean opulence, multicolored marble floors, ceiling frescoes depicting mythological scenes, and a grand central staircase that seemed to float on air. Waiters with trays of champagne circulated among the guests, all clearly members of Europe's business and social elite. A man in his 60s with silver hair and a distinguished air approached them with open arms. "Ethan Vidal, my favorite Mexican friend," he exclaimed in English with a thick Greek accent. "Stavros, a pleasure to see you," Ethan replied, shaking his hand firmly. The host then turned his appreciative gaze to Valentina. "And this lovely lady is—" He let the sentence hang, awaiting an introduction. Ethan suddenly found himself in a situation he hadn't prepared for. A flash of panic crossed his eyes. "She's my—" he began, but the words caught in his throat. How could he introduce her? The woman who cleans my office? My cleaning lady whom I brought as a private joke? "Executive assistant," Valentina completed in a clear voice, extending her hand to the host. "Valentina Sanchez, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Alexandridis. I've heard so much about your impressive collection of Cycladic art." Stavros took Valentina's hand, but instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips with old-world gallantry. "The pleasure is all mine, Kyria Sanchez," he replied with a charmed smile. "And I am impressed. Few visitors recognize the value of our prehistoric heritage. The marble figurines from the Cyclades are one of the most enigmatic and pure artistic expressions of antiquity," Valentina commented. "I understand you own one of the best-preserved female figures from the Speedos period." Stavros's eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Absolutely correct. You must allow me to show you a few pieces after dinner," he exclaimed, offering her his arm. "In the meantime, let me introduce you to some friends." To Ethan's astonishment, Valentina took Stavros's arm with the natural ease of someone who had frequented such salons her entire life. They moved toward a group of guests, leaving Ethan momentarily forgotten. For the next hour, Ethan watched in disbelief as his executive assistant navigated the reception with unexpected grace. Far from standing silently in a corner, Valentina conversed animatedly with Swiss bankers, Italian architects, and French businessmen. "Your companion is truly delightful," a distinguished Greek lady remarked to Ethan, "and her French is impeccable." "French?" Ethan almost choked on his champagne. Sure enough, a few feet away, Valentina was conversing fluently in French with the Belgian ambassador about sustainability in tourism projects. When the gong sounded for dinner, Stavros Alexandridis reappeared at Valentina's side. "My friends, shall we proceed to the dining room?" he announced. "Mr. Vidal, I hope you don't mind, but I've taken the liberty of seating Miss Sanchez to my right this evening. It's rare that I meet someone so well-versed in Cycladic art." The palace dining room was a symphony of luxury and classical elegance. A massive rectangular table dominated the space, set with Murano crystal, French porcelain, and antique silver. Open windows offered a panoramic view of the Aegean Sea, where the lights of boats dotted the darkness like fallen stars. Ethan, seated several places down from Valentina, watched her with a mixture of awe and irritation. Who was this woman? How was it possible that the same person who scrubbed floors at his company was now captivating one of the most influential men in Greece? When the waiters served the first course, an exquisite octopus carpaccio with Kalamata olive oil, Ethan noticed with amazement that Valentina selected the correct utensils without a moment's hesitation. As the evening progressed, Ethan's discomfort gradually morphed into a strange and unsettling admiration. For the first time in his life, he found himself looking at someone he had considered inferior, with something akin to respect, and that terrified him. After the lavish dinner, the guests were led to the palace terrace, a sprawling space with a polished marble floor that seemed to float above the Aegean Sea. Strategically placed torches illuminated the area with a golden glow, while the full moon, enormous and silver, bathed the scene in its ethereal light. A small orchestra played soft melodies in a corner as waiters circulated, offering glasses of Vinsanto, the sweet Santorinian dessert wine aged in oak barrels. The air smelled of jasmine, sea salt, and the subtle aroma of Cuban cigars that some guests were enjoying in a more distant section. Ethan Vidal stood with a group of German bankers, feigning interest in their conversation about interest rates while never taking his eyes off Valentina. To his growing bewilderment, she had become the unexpected center of attention. A few feet away, Valentina was chatting animatedly in English with Sir Jonathan Blackwell, the head of one of London's most important investment banks. "Your analysis of the environmental impact of mass tourism is fascinating, Miss Sanchez," the Englishman commented. "I rarely hear such sensible approaches at these gatherings." Valentina smiled modestly. "True luxury today is sustainability, Sir Jonathan. A resort that destroys the very environment that makes it valuable is doomed to fail." Ethan moved closer, surprised by the ease with which Valentina handled a topic he himself had been studying for months for his presentation the next day. Before he could intervene, Valentina was approached by a group of French investors. To Ethan's further astonishment, she transitioned to French without any apparent effort, discussing principles of sustainable architecture as if it were her specialty. "Je vous assure que notre projet dans les Grenadines intègre des solutions biomimétiques qui réduisent l'empreinte carbone de 60%. Valentina explained fluently. Where the hell did she learn French? Ethan muttered to himself, feeling a mix of irritation and something more uncomfortable he didn't want to name. The evening wore on, and Valentina continued to dazzle the guests, not with ostentatious beauty or calculated flirtation, but with an intelligence and dignity that proved magnetic. In every conversation, she subtly advocated for the interests of the Vidal Enterprises project, but she did so with such elegance that it seemed she was simply sharing her personal vision. Stavros Alexandridis approached her again, this time with a glass of ouzo in hand. "Miss Sanchez, I'm intrigued by your knowledge of our culture," he commented. "May I ask how a young woman from America became so interested in Greece?" Valentina smiled, and for the first time that night, Ethan saw something genuinely personal in her, not a professional mask. "My grandmother was from Crete," she replied warmly. "She immigrated to New York when she was very young, but she never forgot her roots. I grew up listening to her stories about this magical land, learning words in Greek, and dreaming of one day seeing the sea she missed so dearly." "Kalimera, good morning?" Stavros asked with a curious smile. "Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta," Valentina responded, listing the greetings for different times of the day. "And my favorite, opa, which my grandmother would shout every time we accidentally broke a plate at home." Stavros let out a genuine booming laugh. "Absolutely correct. We are the only people on Earth who celebrate the destruction of dinnerware," he exclaimed with delight. He then looked at Valentina with renewed interest, a glint of challenge in his eye. "Tell me, do you also know our traditional dances?" At that moment, as if the orchestra's conductor had been eavesdropping, he gave a signal, and the musicians began to play the opening notes of a zeibekiko, the traditional Greek dance that tells stories of sorrow, pride, and resilience. Valentina's eyes shone with recognition, a flicker of memory and reverence. "The dance of the eagle," she murmured almost to herself. "I see your grandmother taught you well." Stavros smiled, extending a hand toward her. "Would you grant me the honor?" A circle formed naturally on the terrace as Stavros led Valentina to the center. The hum of conversation died down as guests, sensing an authentic moment was about to unfold, fell silent with anticipation. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach, cold and hard. "What does she think she's doing?" he thought, a surge of panic rising in his chest. "A traditional Greek dance? This is it. This is the disaster I've been dreading all night. The facade is finally going to crumble, and everyone will see the imposter." The zeibekiko began slowly, the music steeped in melancholy. Stavros started the first steps, his arms extended like wings, his expression solemn and inward-looking. He circled the space once, establishing his presence, his pain, his pride. Then, with a respectful nod, he invited Valentina to join. To Ethan's absolute world-tilting bewilderment, Valentina stepped into the dance with an astonishing naturalness. Her movements were fluid, precise, and filled with the controlled intensity that characterizes this dance. It wasn't the perfect execution of a professional performer, but something far more valuable. It was the dance of someone who carries it in her blood, who understands its profound meaning in her very bones. She didn't just mimic the steps, she embodied the story. Her arms too became wings, her body bending and rising with a grace that spoke of overcoming hardship. The musicians, inspired by the raw, unplanned beauty of the scene, intensified the tempo. Valentina and Stavros now danced separately but in perfect sync, their bodies telling a story without words, a dialogue of shared history, of loss, of unbreakable spirit. As the music reached its crescendo, the guests spontaneously burst into applause. "Oppa!" someone shouted from the crowd, and soon others joined in the traditional cry, their voices filled with genuine appreciation. The music ended. Stavros bowed deeply to Valentina, not as a man to a woman but as one artist to another, a gesture of respect between equals. He then took her hand and led her back toward the edge of the terrace, where the view of the sea under the full moon offered a respite from the intensity of the moment. Ethan, unable to contain himself any longer, strode toward them. He felt a magnetic pull, a need to understand the woman who was systematically dismantling every assumption he had ever made about her. "I didn't know you could dance," he said, forcing his voice to sound casual, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of emotions, shock, embarrassment, and a deeply unsettling admiration playing out inside him. "There are many things you don't know about me, Mr. Vidal," Valentina replied, her voice serene, her gaze steady. Stavros watched them with the keen interest of a man who enjoys the subtle complexities of human interaction. "Your assistant is a truly remarkable woman, Mr. Vidal," he commented, his eyes twinkling. "I must ask, what is her specific function within your company?" It was the question Ethan had been dreading all night. He braced himself for the inevitable humiliation when Valentina would have to reveal that she was part of the cleaning staff. He imagined the polite, concealed smirks, the re-evaluation of everything they had witnessed. "I take care of the details that many consider insignificant," she answered with quiet dignity, her eyes meeting Ethan's for a brief charged moment, but which in reality hold the entire operation together. Stavros nodded thoughtfully, stroking his chin. "The invisible foundations are always the most important, are they not?" he mused. "Without them, even the most impressive building collapses." "Exactly," Valentina agreed. Her gaze lingered on Ethan for a second longer. There was no challenge in her eyes, no triumph, only a calm statement of fact. Ethan was the first to look away, a wave of heat rising to his face. For 5 years, he had walked past this woman every single morning without truly seeing her. He had relegated her to the category of an object, a tool, a function. He had assumed her grey uniform defined the absolute limits of her being, her mind, her soul. As he watched Valentina now, graciously accepting congratulations for her dance, exchanging business cards with entrepreneurs who clearly saw her as a peer, Ethan Vidal felt something he had rarely, if ever, experienced in his adult life. Shame. Not the superficial embarrassment of a social misstep, but the profound, gut-wrenching shame of someone who recognizes a fundamental flaw in their own character. And alongside the shame, something else, something far more disturbing, was beginning to grow. Admiration. It was an uncomfortable, unwanted admiration, but it was impossible to ignore. When Valentina smiled at a witty comment from Stavros, Ethan also felt another emotion he hadn't anticipated. Jealousy. Not the possessive jealousy of a lover, but the complex, bitter jealousy of a man watching someone he considered his inferior being valued for her true potential by others. The night wore on, the moon casting a silver path across the Aegean, and inside Ethan Vidal's mind, an entire skyscraper of prejudice and assumption was slowly, painfully beginning to crumble. While the party continued on the main terrace, Valentina allowed herself a moment of solitude to process the whirlwind of the evening. She wandered down a side corridor of the palace, drawn by a series of illuminated glass cases housing ancient artifacts. She stopped in front of a collection of Cycladic figurines, small white marble statues with human forms simplified to the point of abstraction. "Impressive, don't you think?" a voice said from behind her. Valentina turned calmly. Before her stood a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and an impeccable navy suit. She had seen him earlier during the dinner, seated at the main table, though they had not been formally introduced. "Extraordinary," Valentina replied, turning her attention back to the display case. especially considering the limited resources of the era. To create such harmony and expressiveness with such primitive tools. The man looked at her with surprise and genuine interest. Precisely. Most people see only crude figures, but few appreciate the technical and artistic achievement they represent, he commented, moving closer to the case. Dimitris Papadopoulos, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Valentina immediately recognized the name from the research she had done on the flight. Papadopoulos Hotels and Resorts, the primary competitor of Vidal Enterprises in the ultra-luxury hotel sector. Valentina Sanchez, she replied, shaking his hand with professional firmness. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Papadopoulos. Please call me Dimitris. The Greek man smiled. Is this your first time in Santorini? My first time in Greece, Valentina confirmed, though in some ways I feel I already knew this place through my grandmother's stories. They walked slowly past the display cases, conversing about ancient art. Dimitris demonstrated a profound knowledge, not of a collector driven by status, but of a true aficionado. This small harpist, he pointed to a figurine, is over 4,500 years old, yet it already shows a sophisticated understanding of the golden ratio. Mathematics in the service of beauty, Valentina nodded. Just like in classical architecture. Dimitris observed her with growing curiosity. Forgive my direct question, but I can't quite place your role in Mr. Vidal's company. Are you an archaeologist? A historian? Valentina offered a slight smile. My degree is in international business, though I've always been passionate about art history, she answered honestly. As for my specific function, she paused, carefully choosing her words, let's just say I keep the gears turning so that others can shine. Dimitris nodded slowly as if confirming a suspicion. Fascinating. You know, there's a concept in ancient Greek architecture called entasis, he commented, seemingly changing the subject. It's a slight curve applied to columns so that, to the human eye, they appear perfectly straight. The invisibly perfect detail that makes the visibly beautiful possible. Their eyes met, a shared understanding passing between them. The column receives no credit for holding up the temple, Valentina continued, following the metaphor. But without it, everything would fall apart. Exactly, Dimitris smiled. Perception and reality. My specialty. They moved into another room, where a small indoor fountain created a more intimate atmosphere, isolated from the party's buzz. I've been watching you tonight, Miss Sanchez, Dimitris admitted without preamble. Your command of languages, your cultural knowledge, your evident intelligence, and the peculiar dynamic between you and Vidal. Valentina maintained a neutral expression, but her body tensed slightly. I'm not judging, Papadopoulos clarified quickly. On the contrary, I'm impressed by your adaptability. Not everyone can move so fluidly between worlds. What do you mean exactly? Valentina asked, abandoning the subtleties. Dimitris glanced around to ensure they were alone. I know Ethan Vidal well. We've been competing in the same markets for years. He is a brilliant businessman, but notoriously, let's say, limited in his perception of people, he explained in a low voice. I don't believe your talents are being adequately valued in your current organization. Valentina remained silent, carefully assessing the situation. I'll be direct, Dimitris continued. I'm expanding my operations into Latin America. Brazil is established, Argentina is in process. Mexico is the next logical step. From an inside pocket of his jacket, he produced an ivory-colored business card with embossed gold lettering. He held it for a moment before handing it to her. I need someone with your cultural insight and intelligence, someone who understands both the invisible details and the importance of visible representation. Valentina took the card, noticing its unusual thickness, almost like parchment. I am offering you the position of Director of International Relations for the Latin American Division, Dimitris declared, with real autonomy and appropriate resources. He turned the card over, and Valentina saw a figure handwritten on the back. It was a salary she had never imagined earning, an amount that would be enough to get her mother the best medical care, to buy a decent home, to pursue a master's degree without a second thought. This is, Valentina began, at a loss for words. It's what someone with your capabilities is worth, Dimitris finished. Someone who understands both the value of invisible work and the importance of a visible presence is exactly what I am looking for. From the other end of the gallery, Ethan Vidal watched the scene with growing unease. He had noticed Valentina's absence and had sought her out discreetly, only to find her in deep conversation with his biggest rival. He saw the exact moment Papadopoulos handed her his card. He saw the look of barely concealed shock on Valentina's face. He saw how she carefully tucked it into her small handbag. And for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Vidal felt the bitter taste of genuine regret. Not the superficial regret of a missed business opportunity or a bad investment, but the profound regret of someone who recognizes they have wasted something valuable that was right in front of them for years. "Take your time to consider it," he heard Dimitri say as he approached them. "The offer will be waiting for you when you return to New York." Valentina nodded, maintaining her composure, though Ethan could see a new light in her eyes. The glint of someone who can suddenly envision a future entirely different from the one she had always taken for granted. "Ah, Vidal," Dimitris greeted him with a calculatedly cordial smile. "I was just congratulating your assistant on her extraordinary performance tonight. You have a true diamond in your organization." The word diamond echoed with cruel irony in Ethan's mind, a diamond he had treated like a lump of coal for 5 long years. "I know," he replied with a confidence he did not feel. "She's one of our most valuable assets." Their gazes locked. Two titans of industry who understood perfectly the game they were now playing, with Valentina as the unexpected prize. "Dinner is about to be served on the South Terrace," Dimitris announced, checking his watch. "Will you join us?" As they walked back to the main party area, Ethan tried to catch Valentina's eye, searching for any hint of her thoughts. But she walked with her gaze forward, her expression serene and inscrutable, like someone guarding a secret that had waited far too long to be revealed. After the spectacular gala in Santorini, the entrepreneur's private jets departed for Athens, where the final negotiations for the Grenadines project would take place. The Vidal Enterprises Gulfstream landed in the Greek capital at dusk, the ancient city painted gold and purple by the setting sun. During the short flight, Valentina and Ethan barely exchanged a word. She pretended to read an art magazine while he feigned reviewing documents on his laptop, but both were absorbed in their own thoughts. She, considering an offer that could change the course of her life. He, digesting a revelation that called into question everything he thought he knew about the people around him. "We're staying at the Hotel Grande Bretagne," Ethan informed her as their limousine left the airport. "The negotiations start tomorrow at 10. Valentina nodded silently. Through the window, the first glimpses of the historic city began to appear. Modern avenues winding through ancient neighborhoods, the perpetual contrast of past and present that defines Athens. The hotel, a 19th-century neoclassical palace across from Syntagma Square, welcomed the pair with the deference reserved for its most distinguished guests. White-gloved butlers escorted them through the opulent lobby of marble and crystal chandeliers to a private elevator. "The presidential suite for Mr. Vidal," the manager announced formally, "and the Acropolis suite for Miss Sanchez." Ethan couldn't help but notice the look of approval the manager gave Valentina. It was no longer the appraising glance given to decorative companions, but the respect reserved for someone of substance. "We'll have dinner at 9 in the hotel restaurant," Ethan said. "Get some rest for a couple of hours." The Acropolis suite, as its name promised, offered a breathtaking view of the most iconic monument of Western civilization. From the private terrace, the Parthenon stood majestically over the city, theatrically lit against the night sky. Valentina showered and changed from her formal gown into a simpler but equally elegant olive-green dress with gold details that evoked Hellenic motifs. As she applied light makeup, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Papadopoulos's offer was a dream: recognition, financial independence, the chance to use her full capabilities. After 5 years of invisibility, someone finally saw her value. But there was something else, something she was reluctant to admit. In Ethan Vidal's eyes, she had seen something new, not just regret, but a spark of genuine admiration that stirred complicated emotions within her. Dinner was surprisingly easy. The conversation flowed, focused on the technical aspects of the next day's presentation. Perhaps they both preferred the safe terrain of business to the uncharted territory of their personal dynamic. They returned to their suites shortly after 11. Valentina changed into a comfortable silk caftan and stepped out onto her terrace. The night was warm, scented with jasmine and rosemary. The Acropolis glowed under the full moon, so close and clear it felt as if she could reach out and touch it. 2.5 millennia of history were gazing back at her. What were 5 years of invisibility compared to that eternity? A soft knock on the connecting door startled her. She knew who it was before she opened it. Ethan Vidal stood in the doorway, still in his dinner suit, though his tie was loosened. His face showed signs of exhaustion, but also an unusual intensity. "We need to talk," he said simply. Valentina stepped aside to let him in. Without a word, they both walked out to the terrace, as if tacitly agreeing that this conversation required the silent witness of the Acropolis. They sat in the elegant wicker chairs, the ancient city spread before them like a blanket of twinkling lights. The silence stretched for several long minutes, until finally Ethan spoke, his voice quiet. "Why did you hide it?" he asked. "Your education, your languages, all of this." Valentina looked at him directly, her expression calm but no longer submissive. "I didn't hide anything," she replied. "You simply never asked. My degree in international business is on the application form I filled out when I was hired. My language skills are listed there too. I even mentioned my Greek grandmother in the family background section." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But all you ever saw was a woman in a cleaning uniform." The ensuing silence was heavy, dense with the weight of 5 years of wrong assumptions and missed opportunities. Only the Athenian night breeze and the distant murmur of the city broke it. Ethan ran a hand over his face, a rare gesture of vulnerability. "I know Papadopoulos made you an offer," he said abruptly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Valentina showed no surprise. She knew he had seen them. "I don't think you should take it," Ethan added. "And why not?" she asked, an edge in her voice she had never before allowed him to hear. "In one night, he recognized what you failed to see in 5 years." The words struck Ethan's pride like well-aimed arrows. For a moment, he looked as if he would respond with his usual defensive arrogance, but something had fundamentally shifted. "You're right," he admitted, with a humility Valentina had never heard in his voice. "I've been blind. Worse than blind, I've been willfully ignorant." He stood up, walking to the terrace railing. With the illuminated Acropolis as his backdrop, his silhouette seemed more vulnerable, less imposing than usual. "Because I want to offer you something better," he said finally, turning back to her. "Not just a title, but the opportunity to transform the entire company. Our company." Valentina watched him cautiously, searching for signs of the manipulative Ethan she knew so well. "Transform it how?" "From its foundations up," he replied. "Starting with how we value talent, how we treat every single person regardless of their role." He moved closer, sitting across from her again, leaning forward with uncharacteristic earnestness. "I need someone who understands both the invisible details and the big picture, someone who has experienced both worlds." Valentina remained silent, processing his words. She had dreamed of an opportunity like this, but now that it was in front of her, deep-seated distrust battled with a flicker of hope. "Why should I believe you?" she asked finally. "How do I know this isn't just a reaction to Papadopoulos' offer, that it isn't just your wounded pride talking?" Ethan held her gaze. "You don't," he admitted. "You'll have to decide if finding out is a risk you're willing to take." Their eyes met, and for the first time, they truly saw each other as equals. Not as boss and employee, not as billionaire and cleaning lady, but as two people at a pivotal crossroads. On the horizon, the first hint of dawn began to tint the Athenian sky. The night was ending, but something new was just beginning. The conference room at the Hotel Grand Bretagne erupted in applause as Ethan Vidal concluded his presentation on the Grenadines Resort project. The European investors, initially skeptical, were now palpably enthusiastic. The project that had seemed uncertain just days before was now secured with multiple capital commitments. "An extraordinary presentation, Mr. Vidal," a Swiss banker commented while shaking his hand. "I must confess, I came here with doubts, but your focus on sustainability and cultural respect has won me over." Ethan nodded with a diplomatic smile, but his eyes instinctively searched for Valentina, who was conversing animatedly with a group of investors at the other end of the room. The night before, after their conversation on the terrace, they had agreed to keep their relationship strictly professional during the negotiations. However, something fundamental had changed. Ethan no longer introduced her as his assistant. Instead, he actively included her in discussions, highlighting her expertise and valuing her input. Valentina, for her part, had shone. Her ability to build meaningful connections in different languages, her intuitive grasp of cultural concerns, and her talent for bridging seemingly opposite viewpoints had been crucial to their success. "Your collaborator is extraordinary," Stavros Alexandridis remarked to Ethan, as they watched Valentina fluently explain the details of an environmental conservation program to a group of German investors. "She has that rare gift of making everyone feel heard." Ethan nodded, a strange mix of pride and remorse churning within him. "She's more than a collaborator," he replied. "She's the invisible architect of many of our successes." At the end of the day, when the last document was signed and the final celebratory glass of champagne was poured, Ethan experienced an unfamiliar feeling. Genuine gratitude, not the egocentric satisfaction of a personal win, but the acknowledgement that this success was made possible by someone he had never properly valued. The Vidal Enterprises private jet soared through the Atlantic sky, leaving the European continent behind. Inside the cabin, the silence was comfortable, almost contemplative. Ethan stared thoughtfully at the clouds below, occasionally making notes on his tablet. Across from him, Valentina was quietly reading a book of contemporary Greek poetry she'd bought at the Athens airport. "It's interesting," Ethan commented, breaking the silence after several hours. Valentina looked up from her book. "What is?" "How things can be right in front of our eyes for years and we still don't see them," he replied, gazing out the window, "like we have deliberate blind spots." Valentina closed her book, marking her page with a thin silk ribbon. "Sometimes we only see what we expect to see," she replied. "It's more comfortable than questioning our own assumptions." Ethan nodded slowly. "I've thought a lot about what you said in Athens," he began, turning to face her directly. "You're right. I was blind for a long time by choice, not by accident." He opened his leather briefcase and took out a sealed manila envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "This is just the beginning," he said. "A formal proposal." Valentina took the envelope but didn't open it, studying Ethan's face instead. "What exactly does it contain?" "A contract for Director of International Relations and Cultural Strategy," he answered, "with a salary commensurate with the position and real decision-making autonomy." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But that's just the start. I want you to have the authority to implement structural changes across the entire company, beginning with how we treat all our employees, especially those we've considered invisible." Valentina held the envelope in both hands, feeling the symbolic weight of its contents. It wasn't just a job offer. It was the culmination of 5 years of unacknowledged effort and perhaps the start of something entirely new. "I'll need time to consider it," she finally replied, placing the envelope in her bag, "and to evaluate Mr. Papadopoulos's proposal as well." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of his competitor, but he nodded respectfully. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The pilot announced they would soon begin their descent into New York. Through the window, the immense metropolis began to take shape through the evening haze, so different from the Greek Isles, and yet so familiar. Valentina watched the city where she was born, where she had struggled, where she had been invisible for so long. Now she was returning, transformed, not because she had changed, but because she had finally been seen. "Do you know what the most revealing part of this trip was for me?" she asked, as she fastened her seatbelt for landing. Ethan looked at her, questioning. "Realizing that I didn't need to change who I am," Valentina continued. "I just needed to stop letting others determine my worth." Her words hung in the air as the plane descended smoothly toward the runway at JFK. The physical journey was over, but their inner journeys were just beginning. As the crew prepared for disembarking, Ethan found himself reflecting on the layers of arrogance and prejudice he had built up over the years. How many other talented people had he overlooked? How many valuable voices had he silenced without even realizing it? In the private terminal, a car was waiting to take them to their respective homes. The vast disparity between Ethan's luxurious penthouse on the Upper East Side and Valentina's modest apartment in the Bronx had never seemed so stark to him as it did in this moment. "I'll see you on Monday," Valentina said, as the driver loaded her simple suitcase into the trunk. "Monday," Ethan nodded, unsure what else to say. As the car pulled away, carrying Valentina back to the reality she had left only days ago, Ethan felt a strange sense of loss, as if something precious he had finally found could vanish once more. His phone vibrated. It was a text from Dimitris Papadopoulos. "Excellent presentation in Athens. The investors are impressed. So was your assistant. My offer for her still stands. May the best man win, my friend." Ethan stared at the message with a mix of irritation and renewed determination. The battle for Valentina Sanchez's future was just beginning, and this time he would not underestimate the value of what was at stake. 3 weeks after returning from Greece, Valentina Sanchez walked through the lobby of the Vidal Enterprises skyscraper. She wore a navy blue tailored suit designed by her cousin Marisol, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knows her own worth. The security guards, who for 5 years had barely registered her existence, now greeted her with respect. "Good morning, Ms. Sanchez," the head guard said, straightening his posture. While waiting for the elevator, Valentina noticed the whispers and curious glances. The rumors about the cleaning lady who came back from Greece transformed had spread like wildfire through the company. When the elevator arrived, several executives got in with her, a stark contrast to the solitary rides she used to take. Some even tried to make awkward small talk. "Nice weather today, isn't it, Ms. Sanchez?" a nervous manager commented, the same manager who weeks ago had intentionally spilled coffee for her to clean up. Valentina simply nodded with a serene smile. This wasn't a time for humbling others. She had learned that true dignity doesn't require revenge. On the top floor, Vidal's executive assistant greeted her with deference. "Mr. Vidal is waiting for you, Ms. Sanchez. He said you can go right in." The CEO's office, which she had cleaned so many times in silent invisibility, now welcomed her as a respected guest. Ethan Vidal stood up from his desk as she entered. "Valentina," he greeted her, a formality in his tone that betrayed a hint of nervousness. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for seeing me," she replied, taking a seat across from him without waiting to be invited. In the 3 weeks since her return, Valentina had carefully weighed her options. She had spoken at length with her mother, whose wisdom had always been her moral compass. She also consulted with her cousin Marisol, who encouraged her to squeeze that asshole for every last drop. She had even met discreetly with Dimitris Papadopoulos during his visit to New York, listening to the full details of his offer. After much reflection, she had made her decision. From her portfolio, a farewell gift from Stavros Alexandridis himself, she took out 2 sealed envelopes and placed them on the mahogany desk. "What's this?" Vidal asked, though he seemed to guess the answer. "This," Valentina said, pointing to the envelope on the left, "is my formal reply to Mr. Papadopoulos's offer." A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "And this," she continued, gesturing to the second envelope, "contains my conditions for accepting your proposal." Ethan took both envelopes, holding one in each hand as if weighing his fate. "May I?" he asked, indicating the first one. Valentina nodded. "Of course." Ethan opened the envelope addressed to Papadopoulos. His eyes scanned the text, and a visible wave of relief washed over his features. "You turned it down," he murmured, still surprised. "Even though his financial offer was considerably higher," Valentina confirmed, her voice even. The second envelope contained a multi-page document. As Ethan read it, his eyebrows rose with growing astonishment. Valentina's conditions went far beyond personal benefits. They included a comprehensive development program for employees at all levels, especially those in service roles deemed inferior. It detailed in-house educational opportunities, college scholarships for maintenance staff and their children, a promotion system based on verifiable merit, and a new corporate code of conduct founded on mutual respect. "This is ambitious," Ethan commented finally. "It's necessary," Valentina corrected. "I don't want to be the exception that proves the rule. I want to change the rule." Ethan set the document down and looked at her directly. "Why us, and not Papadopoulos? His offer was better, and you wouldn't have to fight against years of entrenched corporate culture." Valentina smiled faintly, instinctively touching the silver locket she now wore visibly over her silk blouse. "I'm accepting your offer," she replied, "not because I need your belated recognition, but because I believe I can transform this company from the inside out. Because every person who cleans a desk at night deserves to be seen the way I was finally seen." The following months witnessed a quiet revolution at Vidal Enterprises. As the new director of international relations and cultural strategy, Valentina implemented changes that initially met with resistance, especially from senior executives. "We can't spend the budget on scholarships for the cleaning staff," the CFO had protested in one tense meeting. "It's not an expense, it's an investment," Valentina had replied firmly. "Or would you prefer to explain to our European investors why the company that boasted about social sustainability principles in Greece doesn't apply them at home?" Little by little, the results began to speak for themselves. The work environment improved dramatically. Staff turnover decreased, productivity rose, job applications even started coming in from top talent at other companies, attracted by Vidal Enterprises' new reputation. To the surprise of many, Ethan Vidal backed every single initiative, undergoing his own transformation in the process. The cold, calculating man who measured people solely by their utility began to see value where he had once only seen function. One afternoon, Valentina found him in an animated conversation with Mr. Flores, the elderly man who had tended the building's plants for 15 years without anyone ever speaking to him. "Did you know Julio is an expert in traditional botany?" Ethan later commented with genuine enthusiasm. "He's given me some incredible ideas for the vertical garden in the new development." A year after the trip to Greece, Vidal Enterprises launched the Foundation for Education and Professional Development, an ambitious program offering continuous training to employees and their families. The launch event, held in the main auditorium, brought together the entire staff, from executives to maintenance workers, all seated together without hierarchical distinction. Valentina took the stage in an elegant suit designed by Marisol, who now headed the corporate imaging department. Over her blouse, her grandmother's silver locket shone like a visible symbol of her heritage. "True transformation," she said, looking out at the diverse audience, "isn't about becoming visible to others. It's about never losing sight of who we really are, even when the world insists on not seeing us." She paused, her gaze briefly meeting her mother's. Socorro smiled from the front row, no longer in a wheelchair thanks to the treatment she could now afford. "Every person in this room matters. Every role is essential. And from this day forward, no one at Vidal Enterprises will ever be invisible again." From his seat in the front row, a more human Ethan Vidal watched with genuine admiration and respect the woman who had transformed not only his company, but his entire worldview. As applause filled the auditorium, a certainty settled within him. His greatest business achievement had not been a real estate development, but having had the humility to recognize, however late, the value of the person who had always been there, invisible in plain sight. 5 years after that life-changing trip to Greece, Valentina Sanchez watched the sunset from the terrace of her new home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The property, a beautiful restored adobe house with lush gardens, perfectly reflected the balance of her Hispanic roots and Greek heritage. Warm earth tones, bougainvillea climbing the walls, and a small inner courtyard with a fountain reminiscent of ancient Mediterranean atriums. Socorro, now fully recovered, cultivated medicinal herbs in a corner of the garden, passing on her ancestral knowledge to her 3-year-old granddaughter, Eleni, named in honor of the Cretan grandmother who had started a new life in America. "Look, Mama, Yaya taught me how to find the chamomile," the little girl exclaimed, using the Greek word for grandmother that Valentina had taught her. Valentina smiled, resting a hand on her belly where their second child was growing. Life had blossomed in ways she could never have imagined that morning. Ethan Vidal first noticed her in his office. Vidal Enterprises had become a benchmark for corporate social responsibility in the US and Latin America. The comprehensive development program Valentina had started now had over 200 graduates with college degrees, many from the company's most humble positions. The policies of inclusion and respect she implemented had so profoundly changed the corporate culture that other corporations now sent their executives to learn from their model. The foundation had expanded its activities beyond the company, establishing scholarships in underserved communities and creating vocational training centers in struggling neighborhoods. The newest one, opened in the Bronx where Valentina grew up, offered technical and entrepreneurial training to young people and single mothers. Marisol, her cousin's hair now a vibrant turquoise, had gone from heading the corporate imaging department to founding her own ethical and sustainable fashion house. Her designs, which fused traditional craft techniques with contemporary styles, were now sought after internationally. "What are you thinking about?" a familiar voice asked. Ethan Vidal walked up behind Valentina, handing her a freshly brewed cup of chamomile tea. At 45, he looked different from the arrogant, calculating man of the past. The lines around his eyes spoke more of laughter than stress. His posture was more relaxed, his gaze warmer. Their relationship had evolved gradually, beginning with mutual professional respect that over time blossomed into something deeper. Their courtship had been slow, both of them conscious of the complex power dynamic they had to dismantle. They married 2 years after the trip to Greece in an intimate ceremony where Stavros Alexandridis and, surprisingly, Dimitris Papadopoulos were among the guests. "I was thinking about the circles of life," Valentina replied, taking the cup gratefully. "About how everything comes back, transformed." Ethan nodded, understanding the philosophical depth that characterized his wife. Professionally, they had found an extraordinary balance. Vidal Enterprises now operated under a co-CEO model that leveraged their complementary strengths: Ethan's strategic vision and bold negotiating, and Valentina's emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity. Their latest project, an eco-resort on the California coast, combined sustainable luxury with deep respect for the local communities, including them as partners rather than displacing them. "Dimitris called today," Ethan commented. "He wants to discuss collaborating instead of competing for the new project in Baja." Valentina smiled, thinking of their old rivalry. "Competition made us better, but collaboration will make us transcendent." In the distance, little Eleni scampered around with her grandmother, filling a basket with fresh herbs. Julio Flores, the former corporate gardener, now the official botanical consultant for all Vidal Enterprises projects, patiently showed them the differences between various medicinal plants. Every morning, before starting her day, Valentina would open the silver locket she never took off. Inside the small paper where she had written, "I am Valentina Sanchez, BA in International Business, granddaughter of Eleni, daughter of Socorro, and I am not invisible," had been joined by another line, "I am visible by choice, not for the approval of others." That evening, as the New Mexico sky filled with a blaze of stars, Valentina and Ethan sat down to dinner with Socorro, Marisol, and several close friends. The table, abundant but not ostentatious, reflected their life philosophy. You can achieve success without forgetting where you came from. "To the paths that brought us here," Valentina toasted, "even the most difficult ones. And to the people who helped us walk them," Ethan added, his eyes on her, "especially the ones we were too slow to see." As their glasses met in the air, Valentina felt a profound certainty. True happiness wasn't found in being recognized by others, but in having kept her own essence intact through every transformation. It was in having turned her invisibility into a strength, and then into a beacon for others. The girl from the Bronx who cleaned offices before dawn was now helping to build a different kind of dawn for so many others. And in that achievement, in the congruence between her origins and her present, lay her deepest happiness.